myself this week would be the week, because I start seminary in, oh Jesus, the week that contains the 26th. People at my job always laugh because I'd be like, oh, the week of the, and I just pick a random date in that week. Apparently that's not how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to name like that Sunday or Monday, like the week of the, and I just be like, oh, I thought it was the week that contains that day. It's not, apparently. But I start seminary August 26th, so I'm trying to learn some new, August, so I'm trying to learn some new habits to do things sooner. They did not go into effect this week after I went to the art show and got the piece I wanted. And Michelle, you caused an argument in between me and my wife because I like the one with all of the dandelions. She liked the one with the one dandelion. I don't necessarily care which one she liked because I wanted the picture. And the one with the one dandelion was already in the stage of being dispersed. The one with all the dandelions was like Schrodinger's cat, like it was dispersed and not dispersed at the same time. It depended on the wind. And that's the philosophical one I wanted. So I got that one, let's be clear, but we had to have a very deep physics and scientific conversation, which by the end I was right, apparently, but it was so beautiful. But up to that point, I had not written my sermon yet, so I got home, I had some ice cream, I cleaned my closet a little bit, I did everything except for do the thing that I needed to do, but it is done. I picked this text this week because it's kind of important to me and it came back up. I remember the day this particular chunk of text took hold of me in a way I couldn't ignore it, because sometimes I can. For years, I had been running from this idea of ministry. Every time someone spoke a word over me or someone's like, are you a pastor? No. Or, you know what, you should really think about, tell your mom and think about it. I ain't thinking about it. My no just got more emphatic and grew louder and more certain. I didn't see myself as the kind of person that could carry that mantle in the way I saw people carrying it. I looked at the church I attended, the world, my own convictions, and I decided that God could find someone else. I love God so much that I wanted to help that process, so I did offer him a few names during my prayer time so he could send these same folks to them. One of them was a friend named Solomon, and I wonder what Solomon is up to because he might have just got whisked away in a world of just holiness because I recommended him so well to the Lord. But one morning I woke up. It was May. It was May of 2015. I feel like it was like, I was about to say the week of, but that'll be so foolish because I still don't really know how that works. But it was mid-May, between the 15th and the end of the month. I remember it because this same day, so I woke up this morning with what I'm about to tell you. I got to work, and while I was at my desk, I worked at NetApp in Wichita. While I was at my desk, it was just like this very sober mood. And like I just saw people walking around all sad. I was like, oh no, what happened? And so I was like, oh God, bless these people. I don't know what's going on. I was like praying for them, like, Lord, whatever this spirit is, whatever this mood is, I don't know if people are losing their jobs, whatever, just bless them. And then I got called in the office and got laid off too. I said, well, I've prayed for us, so here we go. So this is all the same day. So I woke up that morning, and the only thing my brain would let me think of was 2 Timothy 1. I was like, well, let me go brush my teeth, 2 Timothy 1. What am I wearing today? 2 Timothy 1. Is Samuel up? I'm like, okay. Let me get my handy-dandy Bible. I'm going to sit on the side of the bed, and I'm going to read it. I read it, and by the time I got to the end of the chapter, I was overcome with emotion. And my next thought was of my grandma Edna, who had passed away while I was in basic training. She had this faith that even though it looked like her life was made of more trials than triumphs, she could not be moved, and you knew she did not play about Jesus. She might play about a couple things, but she did not play about God. So I sat on the side of the bed. I could feel her presence, and it was almost as if I could feel the weight of her prayers. And I was like, okay, God, fine. I mean, I wish I could be like it was this sweet surrender moment, arms wide open, tears streaming, but it wasn't. I was on the side of the bed, like, okay, I'll do it. Yeah. All right, cool. And I go to work. Before I went to work, I had messaged my pastor at the time to kind of let him know, because he had been asking, just let me know when you say yes, like every year, just let me know when you say yes. And I'm like, you'll be waiting. So I messaged him, I got to work, got laid off. So interesting how life comes at you fast. So this week, I found myself returning to this text again. And as I read through 2 Timothy 1, I could not get the phrase fan into flame out of my head, and you'll hear that in the NIV translation soon. So much so that somewhere while I was reading it, between verse 6 and 7, this song came up. So it's a line dance song. And the song is called I Got My Boots on the Ground, and then there's a parenthetical, where them fans at? And so, and I didn't even bring my fan up here, but it really goes, where them fans at? You take your fan and go whack. And it's like, once you hear it, now listen, hear it with caution, because it is an earworm of epic proportion. And if you deal with echolalia like me, it will not leave you, and you will be where them fans at and all over the place for the next few months. And it's catchy. He's like, I got my boots on the ground, where them fans at? Whack. It's very exciting. They have banned the song on Carnival cruise ships. Yes. See, look, all the fans, this is so cute. They have banned the song on Carnival cruise ships because that whacket of the fan is a danger. When you are in close proximity, you can whack somebody's eye out, because it can't just be the little fan. Those fans that people are buying are like, and because you got to get the good whack, like it has to go whop. And so, look, that's what it sounds like. You all are so effective. That's what it sounds like. So when you get home, look it up. I give it a strong PG-13, okay, all right? Or G with guidance, because it's a lot of fans and a lot of legs and a lot of line dancing, okay? But, so it just kept playing over and over in my head, and like I'm chuckling to myself because I'm like, I am so ridiculous. I can't believe that God lets me do this. And I'm like, I can't believe that God lets me do it, and the church will let me do it. And like Brenda's picture is perfect. That is where them fans at. And I could have said, where are those fans? But I don't really talk like that and in comfort. So it's where them fans at. So I laughed at the randomness of it, but then I realized it wasn't random. It's a really genuine question when you break down this text. It's the Holy Spirit saying, friend, I'm trying to tell you that your faith fire may not be as steady as you think it is. It may not be blazing. You might be down to embers. They're smoldering and barely visible, but grab your fan and stoke the flame. How many of you have watched Survivor? This is my pop culture piece. I do it for Nadia, whatever. No, I really do it for me and Nadia listens. But how many of you have watched Survivor? Okay, we got pay. Okay. For those of you that don't, I am going to give you the ADHD-informed version of what Survivor is. Good luck. Look up the Wikipedia later. So, Survivor. It's a show where people actually apply to go live on an island with no amenities. The island is beautiful, but you have no amenities. And the goal is to win $1 million. Each week, there's an obstacle course of some kind. And at first, the island is split into different tribes, and you're competing to see who gets some type of reward. Maybe you'll get fishing gear. Maybe you'll get a tarp. Maybe you'll get 30 kernels of rice. I don't know. You'll get things that help improve your quality of life on the island. Or if you lose the challenge, you lose your flint, so you can't make fire, and you are just sad on your island with no food and no tarp and only the coconuts to drink. And it's very sad. It really is. But they volunteer for this, which is really weird. So after that, so you lose the battle, you go home without your flint, and you have to go to tribal council later that day, and you must vote someone off the island. And so everyone's campaigning. You got to have a strategy game. You got to have a social game. And everybody's campaigning. People go up. They vote on paper. Jeff tallies the vote. And the person's name is called, and you have to walk up with your torch. And then he says, the tribe has spoken, and he torches out your light in a grand dramatic display. Your fire goes out, and you must go home. Once the number of people gets down to the top 4, we get different decisions to make. Paige, your face says, you know what I'm saying? I appreciate that. Thank you. So when you get down to 4, there's still a competition. The person who wins gets an automatic seat to the grand finale. He's in the running for the $1 million, and he gets to pick one person to go with him. So now you got 2 random people here on the sidelines. These 2 people have to make fire. And I know, like, it sounds weird when you say make fire, but they do. They have to make fire. They are given a steel knife, a flint, some coconut husk as tinder, and a few dry wooden sticks. They have to make the fire hot enough and high enough to burn through a little rope, and then a little flag pops up so you know that's the winner, and then they get to go to the final. This part of the show stresses me out. These 2 people are sitting there, and it's like, all right, so Jeff Probst says, go for it. And you see them, they got the little flint, and they got the steel, and they're like, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you knew you were coming on Survivor. Why didn't you practice this? Because there's a way you hold the flint. There's a certain amount of magnesium you got to have. Like, what are you doing? Oh my God, and I'm yelling at the screen. And then they start building a mountain of tinder, and I'm like, if you use too much, it's gonna snuff your fire out. And so they have a mountain of tinder, they're throwing on sticks, they're crying, they're sweating, they're blowing, trying to get this fire to get bigger, and I am about to have a panic attack at home as I holler at the screen. For those few moments, you can see the weight of their task in their sweat and in their tears. And I'm on the verge of tears myself because this is too much. Last night, well, I actually added this piece this morning because I had dreamt about it, but this morning I thought about this and the urgency of it. Them fighting to get that fire going and to keep that fire lit is faith work. It's belief work. That's the urgency I hear in Paul's letter to Timothy here. When Paul writes to Timothy here, he is speaking as someone who knows what it means to face the weight of a raggedy world. This letter was written during near the end of Paul's life. He was in prison in Rome, and we know that he was killed shortly. He was assassinated, murdered, martyred shortly thereafter. But I think he knew it too, because it's almost like a last will and testament in these epistles from Paul. It's different from his earlier letters, which often address the church or theological questions. This one is a farewell. Paul calls Timothy his beloved child, and you can hear the tenderness in his words. He knows the world Timothy is living in, a world where Christians are being persecuted under Nero's rule, where fear and violence loom. Timothy is young and still finding his footing. He's been entrusted with a gospel that's not always welcome in the places that he's being sent to go. Paul understands that there may be a point where Timothy begins to feel the weight of this word, the weight of shame, the weight of fear, and that it might cause him to go quiet, to shrink. So Paul writes to remind him who he is. Paul writes to remind him whose he is. And Paul writes to remind him of where he came from. So Paul starts with gratitude. I thank God whom I serve, as my ancestors did, with a clear conscience. As night and day I constantly remember you in my prayers. In the commentary, Zaire writes that while 2 Timothy begins with a lengthy thanksgiving prayer, Paul's life is God-centered. Normally, Paul uses the word to give thanks, but this time he uses an idiom meaning to have gratitude, which is really rare in the New Testament. For me, as I read that, it's like seeing the difference between the external act of giving gratitude and the internal posture of having gratitude. It's like the difference between getting a gift, it's cool, so you write a thank you letter to show you have gratitude and to give it because that's expected. That's what we do. You get a gift, you give a thank you letter, and that's nice. But then there's those gifts you get that cause you to sit in silence and your eyes water and you hold it close and you hug it because you're so overwhelmed by what this means to you and what this kindness has meant. One is an action that might just be a check on what we should do list, where the other is a posture that has the potential to shift our entire spirit. Paul's gratitude here is awareness. It's awareness of God's presence and provision, even as he sits in chains. Paul goes on, and he's going to lay the foundation for a later directive. He reminds Timothy of the fires that already burned bright in him. He calls to mind the faith that lived in Timothy's big mama and in his mama, a faith that did not die with them, but now burns in him. It is significant that Paul uses a line of women when it is so rarely done. And that significance goes a little deeper, but I don't know if I'm going to get to it today. I'll give you a spoiler. We might have to pick it up again because I'd be here all day. But Paul does honor their legacy because he knows that Timothy didn't get here by himself. He was nurtured. He was sustained by hands, voices, and hearts of women who carried the gospel even in a world that did not and would disqualify them. But Timothy's identity isn't as simple as it seems. We know from Acts and a little bit in Galatians that Timothy's mother was Jewish. His father was Greek, a Gentile. That made Timothy's place in community really complicated, as he was both an insider and an outsider. I think part of why this text speaks to me is because I know what that feels like in community. I know what it's like to stand between both worlds. Paul and Timothy had to navigate that complex societal and cultural pressure of that time. Paul had to address the tension of how Timothy would be received by Jewish believers and leaders. The early church was still, as it is now, wrestling with who belongs and who does not belong, who can preach and who does not get to preach. Can Gentile believers do this work too? And the answer of the Council of Jerusalem was no. They must be circumcised. Paul fought hard against making that a requirement for salvation. He argued with the council. He went back and forth through the text. And ultimately, he bid Timothy to be circumcised so that there would be no issues with the Jews and the diaspora. Mitzi Smith, a womanist theologian, wrote a paper called Paul, Timothy, and the Respectability Politics of Race. She reflects on how this decision reveals the way Paul and Timothy had to navigate politics and racial culture in that day. Timothy's mixed heritage meant he'd always be under scrutiny, no matter what. To carry the gospel to certain paces, he and Paul had to make hard choices on how to present themselves. And it wasn't because God said so. God did not require it here, but because the systems of the day demanded it. So even in a letter meant to encourage, there's history that lingers beneath that surface. And as it is with some of us. For some of us, this resonates with our own struggles. We know what it means to carry the weight of other people's expectations while trying to stay true to who we believe ourselves to be. Timothy's story reminds us that even when our identities are complicated and contested, this fire within us is still holy. Paul doesn't define Timothy by his mixed background, his race, the political debates. Instead, he speaks to the gift, to the God inside of him, the same gift that my grandma would say, the world ain't give and the world can't take away. In verse 6, Paul encourages Timothy. He says, "For this reason, I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God." To fan into flame. So it was an ember. It was still little. Timothy was still getting his foot and he's still trying to figure it out. He's literally healing. He didn't have a traumatic experience. Like a lot has went on. And Paul is saying, fan into flame that thing that's on the inside of you. It's powerful because it acknowledges that fire needs tending. Paul doesn't tell Timothy, okay, it's Survivor, you got to build the fire from scratch. He says the fire is already there, but you got to keep it alive. It will not stay burning on its own. And I think that's where many of us struggle with faith. We imagine that faith should be effortless, always ablaze. But the truth is, faith requires breath and movement. It requires us to return to it, to feed it, to be intentional about not letting it go out. Especially in a world like the one we live in, where it's common to feel like our fire is running low. Paul's words aren't just for Timothy, they are for us. For the Spirit God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline. When I got to that self-discipline part, I just wanted to close my Bible, but I kept reading. I'm not preaching that today. Don't worry, I will not be addressing our self-discipline this week, but we'll get to it in the by and by, not today. But those words cut through the narratives of fear that we hear every day. The Spirit of God is not afraid. Audrey, when you talked about it, we have a blueprint that points to what a life is without fear. It's not small. It's not measly. And yet, power, love, and the sound mind don't just happen on their own. They are fanned. Paul goes on to say, so do not be ashamed of the testimony about our Lord or of me, his prisoner. Rather, join with me in suffering for the gospel by the power of God. This is where all that fire makes your seat very hot. I'd be irritated when it'd be like suffer would be. I'm like, oh man, okay. It has a cost, this fire of our faith, this wondrous work that we're invited to. Fanning the flame is not just personal encouragement, it's about courage. It's about fanning to have courage to live boldly, even at cost. In Paul's time, preaching the gospel was dangerous. Folks was dying left and right, and by dying, murdered, assassinated, state-sanctioned. At this point, Stephen and James had already been martyred. Paul himself was already in prison and being persecuted and about to lose his head, literally. So Timothy, seeing all of this, could have easily been like, you know what, I'm going to just go sail boats. Like, I have been thinking about it, and I'm going to just go back to school, get my degree, set myself free, National Jerusalem University, whatever. I'm going to go do that. But Paul is kind of catching it at the bend and it urges him to resist the temptation. Remember the fire. This feels urgent right now. We are living in a time where faith is so oddly and dangerously wrapped up with empire. Christian nationalism is dressing itself up as righteousness, and it's built on fear, exclusion, and violence. It's trying to shrink the gospel into something that serves the privileged. But the fire we've been given ain't that. We've been given a fire of liberation, a fire of justice, a fire of radical love. If a fire you see don't include those things, it's like those fake fireplaces with just a little candle flickering to and fro. It's a fire that says every life is sacred and that no one is beyond God's love, care, and embrace. Fanning our flames means not letting that fire be co-opted. It means remembering the true gospel and carrying it forward even when the world is there to trip you up, push you back, and shut your mouth. Paul reminds Timothy, what you've heard from me, keep as the pattern of sound teaching with faith and love in Christ Jesus. Guard the good deposit that was entrusted to you. Guard it with the help of the Holy Spirit who lives in us. That good deposit isn't a burden. It's that thing that you've been given that you don't just leave by the front door. It's in your safe deposit box. It's in your jewelry box at the bottom. It's your hidden pearls in the flour in the freezer. I don't know what y'all be doing, but it's that thing that was valuable enough to dig and put a little deeper. It's the gift. It's the truth that has been handed down from generation to generation. It's the truth carried by those who believed even when believing was dangerous. Guarding it is not hiding it. It's living it out. It's letting it shape how we move in this world. When you plant a seed, you're not hiding it in the dirt. You're planting it so that it can get the nutrients so it can grow into the outward thing. When I think about this idea of fanning the flame, I think about what it means to tend to our spirit. How do we take care of ourselves when we're tired and discouraged? Paul was telling Timothy that sometimes it means looking back, remembering the people who came before us, remembering those prayers that if it had not been for God who was on your side, who would you be? It's remembering the song, "My grandmother prayed for me, had me on her mind, took the time to pray for me." I know she did because I was crazy. I mean, I still might be, but I know I'm alive because my grandma worked real hard. Sometimes it means reaching out. And I know we're going to hate this. Sometimes it means when someone asks you how you doing, you don't be like, "Good." And meanwhile, your soul is in shambles. You don't have to hide. Let others tend to. Let others stoke and fan the flame when you can't do it alone. I think of my own life when the fire be low, when the injustice feels too heavy, when I wonder, does this even matter? And every time God has placed someone in my life who helped me remember, who fanned my flame, who reminded me of who and whose I am. That's why we have, and that's what it means to be in a community of faith. That's how the Spirit moves among us, stirring the embers that we can't do by ourselves. So the challenge today, if you choose to accept it, of course, is to hold that fan close. Remember your lineage. Remember how you got here. Think of those folks that prayed for you, who loved you into being, who showed you what faith looks like. Think of those moments when God has shown up for you to blow and to breathe on that little piddly ember that you had left. Even when you didn't expect it, even when you didn't ask for it, even when someone says you didn't deserve it, the wind of God blew and your fire still burns. Ask yourself, how am I tending to this fire? And how am I fanning this flame in others? Where is your fan? This week, choose to fan the flame. Choose to be the kind of people who don't want the fake fireplace. Be the people who carry the fire of love and justice, who remind each other that the Spirit of God is within us. Choose to stand high on the shoulders of those in that mighty cloud of witnesses. Those who believe and are depending in some ways on us. This week, when it feels heavy, remember Timothy. When you feel hostage and tight, remember Paul. When you are tempted to forget, grab your fan. Do not let the fire go out. God has entrusted something mighty to you. The Spirit is alive and well and thriving and has found a home in you. Paul's words to Timothy remind us that this flame is for us all, and it is meant to be shared, guarded, and that together we are meant to keep the flame of this fire burning bright. So when you see each other this week, when you text each other this week, when you run into each other at Dillon's, after you say, "Hey, how you doing?" ask somebody, "Where them fans at? May it be some."